Too Much Information is a production of iHeart Radio. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Too Much Information, the show that brings you the secret history and little-known facts behind your favorite music, movies, TV shows, and more. We are your scions of ska-related factoids. My name is Jordan Runtagh.
Nope.
Well, I am, at least.
I'm not giving you that one. False. And I'm Alex Heigl. Damn it.
And today we are talking about No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom, or as I prefer to think of it, the 90s answer to Fleetwood Mac's Rumours. I make the comparison not only for its glut of ubiquitous radio hits, including Just a Girl, Spiderwebs, and of course Don't Speak, but also the drama. Good God, the drama. You have interband romances imploding, jealousy, teenage tragedy, family squabbles, and ska. Lots of ska. There's drama and ska. There's skama.
Oh, no.
We are 90 seconds in, and I got two massive groans out of you. This is going to be great. And to top it all off, all of this is going down literally in the shadow of Disney's Magic Kingdom, from which the record takes its name. This is so great. The story behind Tragic Kingdom is truly crazy, and the feelings of loss, longing, and anger are apparent in so many of the tracks. No Doubt bassist Tony Kanal, who we will talk about quite a bit in this episode, is quoted as saying that Tragic Kingdom was, quote, the outcome of 3 years of struggle, and there were casualties. Specifically, his relationship with Gwen Stefani, one of the most iconic frontwomen of the 90s, inspiring artists like Lady Gaga and Paramore's Hayley Williams. But the band also played a role, although some would argue a small one, in the brief third-wave ska craze of the 90s. I have to admit, I knew none of the dramatic behind-the-music bait backstory to this album when it came out in 1995. But what about you, Heigl? What was your experience with Tragic Kingdom? Were you cowed by its inescapability or charmed by the energy and charisma of Gwen Stefani?
I'm going to let you in a little secret about me, Jordan. I f***ing hate ska. I hate it so much. I don't even hate it in a way of like, oh, it's like I like people were like, I listen to all kinds of music except country. I hate ska. I hate people who are into ska. I hate ska culture. I hate ska. I hate it so much.
Well, let me put it to you this way.
It's gonna kill me one of these days. It's gonna kill me one of these days.
Let me.
I hate ska.
Let me try putting it to you this way. Do you actually classify No Doubt's music on this record as ska? I mean, this is more pop and almost more
Great question.
pop-punk.
Great question. Yeah. I mean, I haven't dug into there. Why would I do that? But didn't they weren't they closer to actual ska before this, and then this was their record where some big a Robert Mutt Lange guy got his mitts into them and was like, you gotta smooth off some of those edges to make it big.
Yeah, the guy who sang Nothing's Gonna Break My Stride in the 80s was called in to work with them, which we'll touch on later. So yeah, that's some of it. What do you hate about ska exactly?
It's that quote from the Jimmy
you do the almost famous thing to start with.
Everything. Yeah, no, it's marching band kid energy grafted onto...
Pick it up.
Yeah, grafted onto the most surface level interest and exploration of Caribbean culture. Yeah, it's like that thing about that Jimmy Buffett quote, crafting a vision of the Caribbean that had no people of color in it. I'm not trying to short sell Gwen Stefani as a 90s figurehead, but the fact that I saw a tweet, I can't take credit for this, that said people are shocked at the thing that she's dating that big potato, or married to him now, but someone was but they were starting out as a 90s punk adjacent female lead singer and winding up married to a conservative guy named Blake is the most Orange County shit ever. I have to give her credit for, they did what song I actually really like is Underneath It All.
Oh, yeah.
And they do have I think they have a Jamaican dancehall artist on that one, right? Lady Saw?
I think you're right, yes.
Yeah. So, all right, whatever. They took steps to fix that. Even though she did have that whole phase where she was like, look at the Japanese women I'm using as an appendage to my career.
Harajuku, yeah.
They will not speak, and I will have them with me at all times.
I'll tack the nice thing you said about them onto the end of this episode to give it a nice narrative arc. People seem to like that with the Jimmy Buffett thing. There was a change there. All good drama has a change.
It's the hero's journey.
Yes.
Also, I saw this behind the music. Like, this was like the behind the music that came on second only to like Poison and Bon Jovi growing up. And that's why, like, without any exposure
Like
to their
most
music.
often, you mean?
Yeah. And that's why just like passively sitting in front of the TV as a kid, I absorbed more about like this damn story. But I don't think I heard it that much growing up. I mean, I like Spiderwebs a lot. That song goes. Yeah.
Well, you're about to know the story even more, Heigl. And everyone listening, you will as well. I gotta say, this whole story of No Doubt makes Fleetwood Mac's Rumours look like a simple misunderstanding. We'll talk about the breakups, the beefs, and even the bindis at the heart of No Doubt's breakthrough record. At the end of the day, it's really a story about a female powerhouse coming into her own as an artist. You'll hear about Gwen Stefani's phone stalker, the mystery of the missing dress from the album cover, the band's weird but deep connection with The Simpsons, and how a stomach bug inspired a standout album cut. Plus, we'll do a bit on Walt Disney's cryogenically frozen head, so you don't want to miss that.
Is that like the 5th time of this head's appearance on the podcast?
But we've never dug into it until this episode.
Friend of the pod, Walt Disney's frozen head.
So, without further ado, here is everything you never knew about Tragic Kingdom by No Doubt. The story of Tragic Kingdom begins in the home of Disney's Magic Kingdom, Anaheim, California. Specifically, it begins in the Stefani household with siblings Eric and Gwen. They were raised by folky parents who worshipped Bob Dylan and Emmylou Harris, and they even played in a band that gigged at LA's legendary Troubadour Club. And these people sound like adorable boomers. Gwen's middle name, Renee, was taken from the Four Tops cover of Walk Away Renee by the Left Bank. Isn't that sweet?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And while we're on the topic of Gwen's ancestry, there's a persistent rumor that she's related to Madonna, which is understandable given their vague physical resemblance and their pop diva status. But it's not true. Gwen herself has debunked those claims. According to her, the story took root when her aunt married someone with the last name of Chacon, which is Madonna's seldom used last name. So
didn't Madonna have a bindi at one point too?
Oh, probably in the same time. Yeah, around like Beautiful Stranger era.
Hey.
We'll get into the bindis later. That's
good.
Yeah, that's a section here.
Hashtag we'll get into the bindis later.
Yeah, we haven't done the unnecessary hashtag lately. So please tweet at us at hashtag we'll get into the bindis later. But enough about Gwen for now. Let's talk about her big brother, Eric Stefani, who does not get enough press despite the fact that he really is the one responsible for the formation of No Doubt, or to blame in your case. By all accounts, he's an extremely creative, talented guy with a passion not just for music, but also drawing, as we'll find out later. Reading about him reminded me of those stories about the Beach Boys' early days when Brian Wilson would basically force his younger brothers around the piano to sing harmonies with him. Eric Stefani more or less did the same thing with his little sister Gwen. Speaking to Interview magazine in 1996, Gwen recalled, Eric was the really talented and overly hyper older brother who was always pounding on the piano, and I was the lazy girl watching the Brady Bunch. I wasn't doing anything, and he would say, come in here and sing with me. I owe everything to him. I learned how to write songs and how to be in a band because of him. And in one of their earliest musical excursions, Eric roped his kid sister into singing an original song he'd written called...
Say it.
Stick It in the Hole. They were kids. It was ostensibly about a pencil sharpener, but Eric knew it was cheeky. Gwen later told Rolling Stone in 1996, my brother made me do it. And that was really how it was to be for many years to come. She would say, growing up, my brother was the one with all the talent and all the focus. I had him, so I didn't have to do anything, you know? So this is when ska takes over. Both Stefani kids were incredibly taken by the sounds of imported Jamaican ska and also the late 70s English subgenre known as two-tone, which was basically ska mixed with elements of punk and early new romantic new wave. Were you ever into two-tone? That seems like something you could maybe get into.
No, but it is fascinating to me. I mean, it's interesting because it's not the I hate using the term authentic, but there's like an element to British ska that's that is way more authentic than American ska, because like you're growing up in lily white ass Anaheim, but like all the British guys' obsession with ska kind of did come from the fact that a lot of them were like council estate neighbors with a bunch of people from the Caribbean. I mean, Paul Simon from The Clash, who sings probably their most reggae-ish song, Guns of Brixton. He talks about like he only listened to like dub and reggae growing up. He was coming at punk from the complete opposite direction of, like Joe Strummer being super into like Gene Vincent and stuff. I mean, it's interesting because it's actually kind of like the way that urban blues took hold. I mean, it was like when there was sort of a great migration from West Indies countries to Britain, especially Coventry, which is where the Specials are formed. And that's where you get they throw the giant sound system parties where they would daisy chain all the speakers together and do all that. And so, I mean, that's the environment that the Specials come out of. And that's sort of my issue with American ska, is that it does take this genuinely syncretic cross-cultural product and smooth away all the edges into a bunch of white people dancing around in suits and checkered ties.
Do you like, I mean, the music
ska?
That really got...
You like ska?
Well, no. Well, I mean, the music that really got Eric and Gwen Stefani excited and, wanting to make music was stuff like Madness. Eric brought home the Stiff Records 7-inch of baggy trousers, and that was it for him. That's what made him want to just sit at the piano all day and just pound out Madness melodies and stuff. And they loved the Specials, as you mentioned. English Beat and Selector, I think, was a big one. Were you ever into any of them?
No, I think the only stuff that I actually still listen to from that is like the Lee Scratch Perry, like the dub stuff, because it's so spacey and like it's almost like drone music, Yeah. And Lee Scratch Perry's hilarious. He's one of the best interviewees of all time. Just a genuine crazy person. Lee Scratch Perry's talking about burning down his studio because it was possessed. Like, that's what's interesting. Like, you give me the really insane people, not a bunch of dorks from Anaheim.
Well, getting back to the dorks from Anaheim, I mean, Eric and Gwen Stefani were these bored suburban kids in this seriously boring suburb of LA, Anaheim. And there was something about the way these English groups celebrated the mundane things about life, going to school, getting stuck in the rain, taking the bus, with all these raucous, up-tempo, horn-driven tracks. That really appealed to them, gave a sense of, I guess, romance and excitement to their own boring everyday lives. So you can almost see why it would resonate with kids in the boring suburbs. At Eric's insistence, he and Gwen made their concert debut at a school talent show in the mid-'80s when they played On My Radio by the Selectors. It's a pretty cool first concert song. Gwen, this is adorable, couldn't remember the words and held the lyric sheet in her hand the whole time, which is a front person no-no, but I love it all the same. She was clearly very nervous, and to help with her confidence, her mother made her a dress. And it was a tweed outfit copied from the dress that Julie Andrews wears in The Sound of Music when Fraulein Maria leaves the Abbey and sings, "I Have Confidence in Me." She was hoping that would give her daughter more confidence on the stage. I mean, Gwen Stefani fans know that she loves The Sound of Music. It's her favorite movie, and she would revisit it on the track Wind It Up from her second solo album, The Sweet Escape, which samples The Lonely Goat Herd. This is just the first of many instances of Gwen Stefani being an adorable nerd. She was also a big fan of making her own clothes, and she would later say, there were so many disaster stories about me staying up all night trying to make something for a show the next day. Apparently, she didn't even have her own stylist until the 2000s. So at the height of No Doubt's fame, she was choosing all her own outfits and, putting rhinestones on shirts and stuff. She was doing all that herself. Researching this episode really made me like Gwen Stefani a lot more. She seems... Despite what you said at the top of the episode, she's very sweet.
Yeah, she's whatever. I bear her no quarrel. I mean, she was married to Gavin Rossdale, so the lady's done her time. So it wasn't long after this school talent show performance that Eric and Gwen Stefani decided to form a proper band, and the siblings joined forces with Gwen's coworker at a local Dairy Queen, a young Bad Brains fan by the name of John Spence. And he was an upbeat, effervescent guy who was fond of sprinkling the phrase "no doubt" into conversations, a habit that would yield the band's name.
And this John Spence guy would be the frontman extraordinaire, center stage, doing backflips, while the somewhat reticent Gwen would sing back up and kind of keep to herself at the edge of the stage. Eric Stefani would be playing keyboards and serve as the band's chief songwriter, and that was the nucleus of the group. Their sound, especially in this embryonic era, was a funny mix of influences. Writing his profile in Spin, Jonathan Bernstein characterized No Doubt as, quote, the last American new wave group. Rinky-dink keyboards, farting horns, staccato guitars, and vibrato-splattered vocal gurgles, quacks, and squeals. And their two-tone ska influence would help establish them as vanguards of the third wave ska scene alongside Real Big Fish, Less Than Jake, the Mighty Mighty Bosstones, Sublime, and your favorite, Rancid, and their refracted take on the Specials.
You know, it's funny that they covered, not Rancid, but No Doubt, they covered It's My Life, the Talk Talk song. So there is that new wave kind of influence. And also, you found someone comparing them to Oingo Boingo.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I mean, the title track, The Tragic Kingdom, sounds like a Danny Elfman thing. Yeah, we'll get into that later. It's like psychedelic carnival from hell type track.
Well, as most bands end up, the position that most bands find themselves in is needing a bassist. And we enter Tony Kanal, who, I don't know, do fans hate him?
I don't think anymore.
Yeah.
I won't even. You can't call him the villain in this love story.
Yeah,
but
I mean, they were children.
He's a divisive figure.
Well, Tony Kanal, born in India, raised in England, and arrived in the Golden State at the age of 11. Tony joined the band after seeing one show of theirs at the age of 16. He auditioned a week later, and after playing 2 songs with them, he was in the band. And Gwen was smitten
instantly.
She said she ran home after this first rehearsal and stared at herself in the mirror and said, "Oh my God, what am I gonna do?"
Come on. That's really cute.
It is cute. I mean, you know, they're children. They're teenagers, man.
She's a year older than him, I think. So it's got the like Lindsay Stevie thing. Wasn't Stevie Nicks a year older than Lindsay?
How much cocaine was there? Yeah, we're not going to talk about
probably
that.
Not much.
So it did take a few months, but after a house show, Tony and Gwen walked home together, and she made the first move. She said, "Dude, are you going to kiss me or what?" And Tony, admirably, thought of the band first. He said, "No, what about the band?" Since it was an unspoken rule that no one in the band date Gwen, which was sort of, I guess, ambiently in the air because of Eric, right? As the band leader.
Her big brother is the leader of the band. So yeah, it's a pretty big reason not to.
And I guess she wore him down, but he assumed it was going to be like a bit of a fling, and she fell hard. To use Gwen's words, she was in love. But they had to, what are they, sneaking around? How do you do that when you're playing in a rehearsal space like the size of a postage stamp? I guess things came to a head during a Halloween party that they were playing, where Tony showed up in costume, dressed as a woman. And before Gwen got there, his bandmates all took him aside and said, "If we find out you're going out with Gwen, you're dead." And that brings us to the lovely evocative image of Tony Kanal dressed as a woman sitting outside on a curb crying his mascara off.
Oh. Yeah, he said that their relationship was, I think his quote was, a secret of immense proportions. Like, this wasn't like, oh, let's keep this like secret because it just adds a little excitement to it. Like, no, this was for real. They didn't want anyone to know.
Yeah, and he took her to prom, at which point she was already a college freshman, which must have scored him immeasurable points with his classmates. You're bringing the college girl to your high school prom.
Did you ever date anyone in a band? Or in your band?
No. No. Well, I mean, other than my wife, but we were only in the Halloween cover bands together. No, I don't know. It's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, we got all these great stories out of it and some ska. Anyway, they worked together. They had the same part-time job at what, a Target?
A department store or something. Yeah.
Tony, again, kind of went in this with a different set of expectations than Gwen. She was heavily invested, and she said, this is a semi-alarming quote from a college freshman, "All I ever did was look at Tony and pray that God would let me have a baby with him." This intensity would ultimately drive Tony away and inspire a lion's share of the track list on Tragic Kingdom. But before we get to that, We come as we must to the bindi. Yeah, man. I mean, I don't think a lot of this band would fly in 2022, or the Harajuku Girls phase. But I guess she passed it off as a loving tribute to Tony's culture that she got from his mom.
Who was Indian, it should be said.
Yes.
So there you go. But back in 1987, no doubt, I can't even say they were at a crossroads. They had barely set out on their journey. They were barely a year old, but they were still making a name for themselves as a party band in the LA area. And in December of 1987, they were offered a gig at the Roxy Club, which, as we talked about in the Guns N' Roses episode, was the hub of the LA music scene on the Sunset Strip at the time. And the band's lead singer, John Spence, was so pumped for this. He urged everyone to rehearse all through their Christmas vacation because this seemed like their big break. And then something absolutely horrific happened. On December 21st, just days before the gig, Spence drove to a deserted parking lot and shot himself at the age of 18. And he left a 2-page letter that read in part, "I think I felt too much pain and all I see in my future is more." And he signed it, "I'm sorry, goodbye." And the band were beside themselves because he seemed so up and energetic. He's the guy at the front of the stage doing backflips, and he just seemed so chipper all the time. And Eric Stefani, no one in the band really ever figured it out, but Eric Stefani theorized that maybe it had something to do with this pressure of the upcoming gig. So the surviving members announced that the Roxy gig would be No Doubt's final show, and they played it as a tribute to John Spencer, their fallen frontman. But ultimately, they decided to reunite a month later, believing that John would have wanted them to keep going. And there's an unreleased song called Dear John that pays tribute to their friend. So to take over the spot as a lead vocalist, they hired a guy by the name of Alan Mead, who was described by Gwen as a, quote, disco smooth dork. I don't know what disco smooth means, but it's very evocative. But then he and his girlfriend had an unplanned pregnancy, so he quit the band to get married and become a father, and he left Gwen as No Doubt's front woman forevermore. And then the remainder of the classic No Doubt lineup began to coalesce around Gwen, her brother Eric, and bassist Tony Cannell. First was Tom Dumont, a guitarist who'd received Kiss's Destroyer album as a Christmas gift, and that kicked off a lifetime of metal shredding. And when he auditioned for the band, he disguised his long hair with a ponytail tucked into his hat because he wanted to try to hide his whole metal thing. And then drummer Adrian Young was a longtime fan of the band, and he was so smitten with Gwen that he once called the number on their DIY cassettes that they sold at concerts just as an excuse to talk to her. And once, I guess he'd heard that maybe she and Tony had broken up, so he went to the department store where she worked to try to ask her out. No dice. But when No Doubt were looking for a new drummer, he went to the audition. He really wanted the job. He lied and said he'd been playing drums for 8 years instead of barely a year. But then he became their full-time drummer. And he was famous within the band for disrobing at the drop of a hat, which, given his apparent feelings for Gwen, reads as slightly exhibitionist and suspect. But I'll choose not to dwell on it. So by 1990, the No Doubt lineup is complete.
Diet flea is what I would call that guy.
Please read the heading on this.
First you get the ska, then you get the flop, then you get the power. That's a good one, I have to say. Yeah, No Doubt plays. They're gigging around LA, playing festivals in the early 90s, and they attract the attention of a gentleman named Tony Ferguson, who is an ex-Stiff Records. Was he A&R there too?
I think he was an A&R guy, yeah.
And so now he was working for Interscope, newly formed by Jimmy Iovine. And Tony Ferguson, I just read that he was impressed by seeing a bunch of stage divers at one of their shows and took Iovine to a gig. And Iovine said, "That girl will be a star in 5 years." And this was 1991, so almost 5 years to the day. Way to be, Jimmy. The band released their self-titled debut in 1992, recording at the classic move of in the middle of the night shift at the studio when the rate was cheaper. I love how many things this pops up in bands like bios, because when I was recording in studios, that was never even like offered to me. Like everyone was like, "No, we're not recording this overnight." No.
Like I would imagine you have to pay the engineers and producers time and a half for being off.
Yeah. But, the album took a dive, as one would expect in the climate of 1992. So slotting your radio-friendly, quirky ska new wave up against Alice in Chains.
And Nevermind. And
Yeah. If you wanted, if you wanted an illustrative anecdote from the time, the band gave away promo kazoos.
That seems like an Eric Stefani thing. Like, he was the one who was more in the whole Danny Elfman, Oingo Boingo stuff. Like, he brought like elements of like weird ska cabaret to the whole mix. So yeah, that seems like it's something that comes from him. Which again made
Lane
them.
Lane Staley showed up to Alice in Chains concerts with a syringe hanging out of his arm, and no doubt's like, have a kazoo. Anyway, the label yanked their tour support. That's rough. When you bomb that hardly, the label's like, we're not even sending you on tour anymore. And needless to say, did not ask for a follow-up. Yeah.
Tell them they blew their budget on for the second album on kazoos.
The kazoos were a bad move. I just mentioned this earlier. The LA scene at the time is dominated by, sort of the fallout of hair metal, because all those hair metal bands were still big at this point in the early 90s. And, as I also alluded to earlier, garbage white guy funk, except for Fishbone, who rule, but no doubt didn't fit into that landscape. As Gwen would later tell Interview magazine, we were always the dork band from Anaheim. We never were cool enough or tough enough because we grew up in Orange County with all those punk bands. We played with them, but I always felt like Shirley Temple, just this little lollipop out there, and I could never have a really raspy or loud screaming voice. We just never fit in. Plus, all the LA people looked down on us because we were from Orange County. We weren't cool. And in the Rolling Stone profile, they note that her vanity case had stickers that just said dork on it.
Have you ever seen video from like late 80s, early 90s of Gwen Stefani? She like brings it. She's pogoing. She's like really
doing push-ups
like
on stage.
Yeah.
I remember all that. Yeah. Oh man, they said anyway, at one point a DJ for massively influential LA radio station K-Rock said at the time, it would take an act of God for this band to get on the radio. And they in Behind the Music, I remember this, they talk about their tour dates for the touring behind this record, where there were 7 members of the band and 4 people in the audience at the bar.
And they were only there because they'd met him at the hotel and put him on the list, so they didn't even pay.
Gwen later said, we had some really good shows when no one was there. I'm telling you, which Jordan, you and I have played Gutter, 4 bands of 4 on Wednesday.
And they were great shows.
Yeah, those are some of the best ones. And they were still all in college around this time. So, at least, whatever. At least they had a backup plan.
Yeah, so what were we doing in college? Like, we weren't signed to Interscope.
That's true. Yeah. Well, at least I wasn't playing ska. Does ska still have, I'm sure ska still has Defenders. This is going to be like a Red Hot Chili Peppers thing where they're going to like come out of the woodwork after me. Whatever.
I'll find you.
Yeah, I was going to say, what are they going to do? Like dance around me and say, pick it up a bunch of times? Hit me with a trombone.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment.
So, no doubt we're upset with Interscope at dragging their feet on letting them put out their follow-up album. So they recorded a bunch of songs in the garage of their shared house on Beacon Avenue in Anaheim, which had belonged to Gwen and Eric Stefani's grandmother. And when their grandmother died, it went to her parents, and they agreed to let them turn it into a studio rehearsal place. And it's in the beginning of the Just a Girl video, also Trapped in a Box. Literally around the corner from Disneyland, this, rehearsal studio spot looms large, as they say in the band's legend. And it was sold a few years back to someone who had no idea who they were. Which, sunrise, sunset. They banged out an album's worth of material over a weekend, calling it the Beacon Street Collection. And,
sounds like a mall.
Yeah, right. The Claire's Beacon Street Collection. Yeah, I don't know. Does it? I didn't listen to it. I'll never listen to it. What does it sound like, Jordan? Give me your capsule review.
It's more raw than a lot of the stuff that you would hear on the radio years later from Tragic Kingdom and Return to Saturn.
Sure.
It definitely is what was lacking on the debut album. Like that one maybe seemed a little more polished than what their fans were used to, whereas this almost felt like a live album. And it also had the track with Bradley Nowell from Sublime, which is weird. I don't really understand how they were able to get away with just recording an album on their own while signed to a major label, and then they just printed it up themselves and sold it at concerts. Like, I guess that's just speaks to how little Interscope thought of them. They're like, oh yeah, we don't care what you're doing.
So they sold, they pressed in 1,000 copies in a month or two. I just saw this sold 100,000 copies. That's wild for something recorded in a house. But rather than being furious, Jimmy Iovine, perhaps wisely, saw the dollar signs and decided to let him record a proper follow-up.
Unfortunately for this new album, they were turning in these like 6 to 8 minute long epics that were just all convoluted and didn't fit on a pop album at all. And only 2 of them, both by Eric Stefani, actually made it onto the Tragic Kingdom track list as we know it. There's the psychedelic-ish song The Climb, and also the title track, which describes a dystopian Disneyland and Walt's cryogenically frozen tears as dripping icicles, which there you get the Danny Elfman Oingo Boingo type thing there. While we're here, why not do a little sidebar on Walt Disney's Frozen Head? What do you think?
Why not?
Yeah, let's do it. So despite the persistent urban legend, Walt Disney is not frozen. I was actually very disappointed to learn this. The New York Times reported in 2003 that his death certificate says he was cremated. And according to a PBS documentary, his ashes were interred at a family mausoleum at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Glendale, California. And people close to Disney have also refuted this frozen theory. His own daughter, Diane, wrote in her 1972 biography, "There is absolutely no truth that my father, Walt Disney, wished to be frozen. I doubt that my father had ever even heard of cryogenics." I question this because Walt was really into technology and futurism, and at the time of his death, he was working on Epcot, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. That was his last big project. So I wouldn't put it past him to be aware of it. And the subject of cryogenics was actually pretty big at the time he died in 1966, because there had been a book that had been published a few years earlier by Robert C.W. Ettinger called The Prospect of Immortality. And that's really what brought the topic of cryogenic freezing to popular consciousness. So it's really unclear where this whole rumor that Disney froze himself got started. It's probably due in part to the fact that his funeral was kept really under wraps. And so you factor that in with his reputation as a technological innovator, and there you go. People just kind of, when there's a lack of information, we know this as digital news journalists, people start to...
Do you want to know where it came from?
Where? I don't know.
According to PBS, in early 1967, a few weeks after Disney's death in 1966, a reporter for a tabloid newspaper called the National Spotlight claimed he had snuck into St. Joseph's Hospital in Burbank, directly across the street from Disney Studios, where Walt was being treated. And the reporter said that he disguised himself as an orderly, broke into a storage room, and saw Disney suspended in a cryogenic metal cylinder.
I did not know that was where it came from. Wow.
But, PBS does debunk it, says the National Spotlight doesn't appear in most major newspaper archives. But, that doesn't necessarily prove anything.
And people could just mimeograph whatever they want in the 60s. And
how deep does the rabbit hole go?
The hospital that he was being treated at when he died was right across from the Burbank studios. And I guess at night, the staff at Disney would leave all the lights on the studio so he could see it and just kind of feel like bolstered knowing that, work was still going on.
Wait.
What?
It gets deeper.
Does it get deeper?
Bob Nelson, former president of the Los Angeles-based Cryonics Society of California, gave a 1972 interview to the Los Angeles Times directly claiming that Disney wanted to be frozen. In 2013, LA Magazine interviewed Nelson again. Chris Nichols asked him to elaborate, and he said, Nelson said, quote, "We got a call from Walt Disney Studios asking us how many people had been frozen and what kind of facilities we had and who the medical staff was."
Oh.
This is all from an SF Gate article, by the way. So if you're interested, it's out there. It's from October of last year. So,
whoa. I wonder what was happening in October of last year that would
nothing else.
Be an anniversary.
Yeah. Nothing big going on.
Do you know the last thing that Walt Disney ever wrote?
A slur?
No, literally like pen and paper. Last time he ever put pen to paper.
It was that S logo that people draw in middle school. I don't know. What do you want me to just keep pitching stuff?
It was Kurt Russell. He wrote the name Kurt Russell.
Oh, I did.
Nobody knows
why. You told
why.
me this before.
Oh,
yes.
did I? Oh, I'm repeating my story.
I think you told me that. Oh man, maybe his
Probably.
consciousness lives on in Kurt Russell. He was like, "That's the vessel. That's the vessel
Export
I
me
wanted."
into
Upload
because
me
wait,
into
the
Kurt
movie
Russell.
that I think the next movie that Kurt Russell made was called The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes.
Yeah,
in
yeah,
1969. So maybe that's some kind of like hint. Wow,
Kurt, if you're trapped, blink twice.
Yeah. Did you see there was this incredible movie that came out in a couple years ago, I think 2018, called The Further Adventures of Walt's Frozen Head. And the whole plot of this movie is that Walt's head is unfrozen once a year and just brought around the park in a jar to oversee operations. And it's just about a day with this like park lackey carting around Walt's frozen head in the jar, and they're like evolving relationship throughout the day. And the really hilarious part is that this was made without the knowledge or permission of the Walt Disney Company or his family, which is
of course
hilarious. Like that they just weren't sued into oblivion.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyhow, No Doubt's 5.5-minute title track about Walt's frozen head was not destined to set the charts on fire. So Interscope called in a ringer. Producer Matthew Wilder, a.k.a. the guy who sang Break My Stride back in the 80s. That's right. They got the Break My Stride guy to come in and try to polish their sound. Not exactly the coolest dude in the world, but he had a background in idiosyncratic new wave, and they thought that he'd be the right guy to rein in Eric Stefani's long ska prog epics. I'm really sorry I just said ska prog.
Yeah. There is such a thing.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah. Catch-22, I think, is the big one. Is really all the marching band, all the marching band kids I knew in high school were like, "Oh, Catch-22, great horn charts."
Wow. Moving right along. Unfortunately, No Doubt were not happy by having this interloper in their midst. Despite his new wave credentials, they just felt like they were being intruded on by this 80s has-been. And Gwen later characterized it as such an invasion at first.
Yeah, and, obviously the guy taking it hardest was Eric, who had, as Gwen and pretty much everyone else says, had been the creative engine of the band, writing all of this material over the past 8 years. That is tough, too, being in a band for nearly a decade, and you get a guy coming in being like, "We're throwing all this, scrapping it." So yeah, he hated the idea of a stranger coming in and meddling with the process and the song. So he started to distance himself from the band, first from the writing and then the recording. And then he even just stopped rehearsing, which was all the more awkward because all the rehearsals were held at his house. And finally, he quit the band in September of 1994. He had previously done some animation work on the first 2 seasons of The Simpsons. And so he just went and took a job there as an animator. And you said he also did some work on Ren and Stimpy, right?
Yeah, I was unable to find exactly what, but I saw, I think on his IMDb page that he'd worked on that too.
His favorite Simpsons character is Bart, and he said because he relates to him. And, he actually went and subsequently drew his old bandmates into the Homer Palooza episode of The Simpsons in 1996. One of my favorite Simpsons lines of all time, Billy Corgan, Smashing Pumpkins, Homer Simpson, smiling politely. I think that was a Conan line. It had to be.
Yeah.
He also, they made an appearance on King of the Hill, where they played Bobby Hill's Prom. The long shadow of the Fox animation block in the 90s. One of the last songs Eric wrote for No Doubt was called Bye Bye Birdie, which is a mournful farewell song about a baby bird who needed to fly off into the sky. Little on the nose there, Eric. Never recorded, but message received. And there's a big Rolling Stone profile from 1996 of the band by Chris Heath.
He wrote the incredible Spice Girls profile for Rolling Stone, too, that we talked about in our Spice Girls episode. Great writer.
But Eric had copped to being a little bit off track, I guess you put it as. He said, I was trying too hard to put my personality or my being on this planet through the music, and I didn't know how to express myself any other way. So when that was compromised, I was lost. But I think I found myself more by losing that and having to act as a human. Art should imitate life, not the other way around. Consequently, he moved on to forming a ragtime band, performing things like Scott Joplin's seminal composition Maple Leaf Rag and the theme to The Little Rascals. That is, did this man ever, did he ever have sex once?
Watching him on the Behind the Music episode, which was recorded, I think, in like 2000 or taped in 2000. So it wasn't even like that late after he left, like only a couple of years. There's again, I don't know this man. I know very little about him. There's a haunted look. He seems unhappy. Not necessarily that he left the band, just in general. I get kind of, I mean, this whole thing reminds me of Brian Wilson, like the guy who started the band, was the creative engine, decided to just back away, and then the band would say, well, no way, and then built a studio in Brian's house to try to like make it easy for him, and then he just retreated to his room and was like, no, I really don't want to deal with this. Like, that's the sense that I'm getting here. Yeah, I don't know much about what his deal is. Maybe I'm wrong.
It's got to be a real head trip, you know. You lead a band. You lead a band for 8 years. Somebody comes in, takes all your personality out of it, and they become one of the biggest bands in the world.
Fair, yeah.
But the band did step up, although it was a blow to them. Gwen says in the Behind the Music, we can't have a band without Eric. No doubt is Eric Stefani. Tony echoed that. He said when Eric left, it was a real pivotal moment for the rest of us because he is such an incredibly creative musical genius. When he left, it created this sort of, okay, what are we going to do now? But that forced Tom, Gwen, Adrian, and myself to step up. You made the comparison to Pink Floyd following Syd Barrett's departure, which is either a compliment or an insult to those two men. So they did. The other guys and girl in the band decided to start...
Keep on trucking.
Keep on trucking, step into the spotlight, fill the void, whatever belabored music critic cliche we're going to land on there. Tom DeMont, the guitarist, Shredhead, he studied classical music composition, classical guitar. Well, I saw that he studied music theory for like 5 semesters and then left when they made him play classical guitar, which is funny to me because the solo on Don't Speak is like
Spanish guitar.
Yeah, nylon string guitar.
Well, but he used a pick, which apparently like enraged big no.
Who the compared Adrian Young to Neil Peart?
I don't remember. And for the sake of their Twitter mentions and you, I won't.
And Tony Canal played in his high school jazz band, and I remember in the he was obsessed with Prince. In Behind the Music, doesn't he talk about listening to Computer Blue on repeat endlessly?
Yeah.
Oh man, I just dredged that one up from my subconscious.
I'm shocked at how much you're able to recall from that, considering you hate them.
I told you I watched it so much. It was on all the time. That one, Bon Jovi and Poison. I know. Anyway,
the David Cassidy one was a big one for me. That was on all the time.
That was sad though.
Well, yeah.
How
low was I? On the sidewalk, licking the curb. That's how low. I'll never forget. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's rough. And Gwen had, she looked like Ava Gardner, right? Or who am I thinking of? I don't know.
You know what? I can kind of see Ava Gardner.
But she was doing the pin curl thing, right? She kind of had that.
Oh, on the cover when she was doing the whole retro Vargas girl thing.
Yep.
Yeah. I can see Ava Gardner. Veronica Lake with the hair, too.
That's who I was thinking of. Sorry. Gwen, she started writing her own lyrics for the first time, including Spiderwebs and Sunday Morning. And that brought, a newfound authenticity to the group. Probably made it a little also less arch and weird to have his kind of diaristic, lyrics as opposed to prog ska.
Yes. So there she was singing her own words, and boy, did she have a lot to say. It was traumatic enough when her friend took his own life and she was forced into the role as no doubt sole lead singer and frontwoman. Then her big brother, the guy who'd been a role model and sort of her guide her whole life, just leaves. And it has to be said that was tough on their relationship. After he left the band, Gwen and Eric went through therapy together at their parents' insistence to patch up their relationship. And Gwen later said, I didn't want to lose my brother, because everything that I am is because of him. So that's all really rough with the band mess, family mess. Now we got a romantic mess too. Gwen gets dumped by bassist Tony Kanal in this same time frame. They'd been together nearly 8 years, and he was feeling stifled by their relationship. He wanted space to grow, all the usual reasons that people give. They lived together, worked together, played music together. That's bound to be a strain on anyone's relationship. And Gwen later admitted, I forced Tony to go out with me. This is her quote. He wasn't even interested. I don't know about that. When we made out that first night, I think he thought it was more of a one-night kiss. But then we started going out. And after that first year, I was going, when are we going to get married? And yeah, hearing that quote from earlier about how she would just look into his eyes and pray to God that they would have a baby together. Yeah, maybe she wanted more than he was able to give, which is sad. So this was an awful time for Gwen. And as she said in No Doubts Behind the Music special, everyone I love the most, my 2 boys, were gone. That's awful. And she elaborated on this in an interview with the OC Register during the album's 25th anniversary in 2020. She said, quote, I was very naive. I was very sheltered and I depended so much on Tony. And then when we broke up, I was like, I don't know what to do with my life. I was so dependent on him. And then with my brother leaving, I followed Eric around like a puppy and looked up to him and was doing whatever he told me to do. So to put it in classic rock terms, Gwen was going through a Pink Floyd Syd Barrett situation, which we touched on earlier, a Fleetwood Mac relationship drama situation, and the Beach Boys Brian Wilson style family crisis. All at once, all one person. No one else in the group knew what that felt like, all of those things except her. That's a lot. And Gwen used to say that Eric, this talented cartoonist, invented, in quotes, Gwen Stefani, the pop star, as a cartoon. But now she was forced to take control. And I think it exposed the steeliness in her that maybe even she didn't realize she had. Tony, when he broke up with her, offered to quit, no doubt, and she wouldn't let him. And then when an interviewer asked her if she'd offered to leave too, she just laughed and said, hell no, which is awesome. Yeah, the whole experience essentially made a songwriter out of Gwen, and she began writing lyrics that tried to make sense of everything that was happening around her, especially this breakup. And Tony Kanal, to his credit, encouraged her to write these lyrics, even when they were very clearly attacking him. And he later said, to me, the art was more important. And she would write these songs like Happy Now and Sunday Morning, both of which are pretty vicious. And then she would immediately call Tony up and share them and say, dude, I totally wrote the raddest song. I have to read it to you. Promise you won't get mad at me. And then read these lyrics that are just ripping him apart. Don't Speak is the most famous song Gwen wrote about her breakup, but Happy Now is the most scathing. And it's basically Gwen taunting her ex after he breaks up with her, saying she loves her newfound freedom. And the words include, you killed the pair, now only one is breathing. There's no looking back. This time I mean it. Are you happy all by yourself? You've got no one else. You're by yourself, all by yourself. All by yourself. Pretty brutal.
Yeah.
She would say it's the perfect revenge song of someone who got hurt in love. It was really meant to be painful. And she's saying this in like some kind of promo video, and Tony's sitting right there. And he says, well, it worked, so thank you. And he stands up and walks off camera. And she laughs. It's like, seems like it's meant to be a joke, but way harsh, Ty.
That man has
the parlance of the times.
That man has a steely resolve at the core of him.
Yeah. The videos are interesting to see them interact and hear her talk about the inspiration behind these songs. And a K-Rock DJ who claimed that it would take an act of God to get them played on the radio played Happy Now as the band's popularity was on the ascent. And people knew the relationship drama at the heart of the lyrics at this point. And as the song ended, the DJ leans into the mic and goes, take that, Tony. So this is all over town. Your relationship, dirty laundry, is being beamed out by the most popular radio station in LA, and everyone knows what it's about. So I mean, again, poor Gwen, it's a terrible situation for everybody.
Yeah.
And guitarist Tom Dumont said in the Behind the Music special that sessions were a little awkward at this point, understandably. He said, quote, "There was so much tension in the room. It was just so thick, it was almost unbearable. There were many occasions when Gwen had to just leave the rehearsal room to collect herself." And she later commented that even though the breakup was difficult, it made her a better songwriter and helped her find her creative power. And the whole genesis of this album is especially interesting to me because it shows that it really does follow in the grand tradition of the extremely intimate, almost confessional singer-songwriter stuff. But while Alanis Morissette was taken much more seriously with Jagged Little Pill, which was released 4 months before Tragic Kingdom, No Doubt, and specifically Gwen Stefani, were treated as superficial and fluffy. And maybe it's the band's presentation. Maybe it's the blonde thing. I don't know. Maybe it's the up-tempo tracks. Maybe it's the horns that you hate so much. I don't know. But I think Tragic Kingdom has just as much emotional authenticity as your Jagged Little Pills, your 21s, your Fiona Apple's Title, your Tapestries even. Might not be equal for a musical or technical standpoint, but I think it has that same degree of emotional authenticity and truth.
I mean, it's tough. I wonder if they actually expected to have to tour and promote this thing for a year.
They talked about that. Well, they were supposed to tour for, I think, 2 or 3 months. They went out for I think it's 28 months ultimately. Yeah. That kind of drove them a little nuts, understandably, because everyone all around the world, not only are they just knocked off balance with the fact that they're traveling for years at a time, but they're just constantly being asked about all the most heartbreaking things in their lives. So yeah, that's got to be rough.
Yeah, and this is also kind of when they start foregrounding her. Again, I remember from the Behind the Music thing of them talking about she is such a charismatic person and she is this just powerhouse on stage, and the rest of them are kind of, all due respect to the other three, just dudes. and so I'm trying to think of magazine covers at the time, but I'm sure
Spin was one. It was Riot Girly. I think we mentioned it later, but I think the headline was Riot Girly, No Doubts, something or other. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like that headline.
I'm sure neither did Bikini Kill.
Yeah, neither did that.
Now, so we get to Don't Speak, which is, the archetypal. Still their biggest hit, do you think? Or was one of those Return of Saturn
Just a Girl
songs?
might be.
Oh, yeah. Okay. But it is, Gwen's Steely Resolve song, right?
It's a Fleetwood Mac moment.
Yeah.
It's her Silver Spring moment.
She told Spin, when we broke up, I still forced Tony to kiss me. That's weird. I was in denial. I might have lost the title of girlfriend, but in my eyes, we were still together. For a year, he didn't have to come to my house when I demanded it. He didn't have to do anything, but when he felt like it, I was there. It was horrible. Yeah, and so that's
a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. And that's where this song comes from. They'd been kicking around a rough sketch of it for quite a long time with a different structure, different words. Eric Stefani had actually written the music for it and gone through a couple different incarnations before Gwen arrived at the final draft of the lyrics. 6 takes on that guitar solo. You think that's a 6-take guitar solo, Jordan?
That's not even 6 takes to do it. They're all stitched together to make the one final one.
Yeah. Tony said he told Complex later, because it was so real and we were living it, all that stuff came up in that song. That's the real deal. That's our lives, and that's what was happening to us at the time. It was a very, very intense period of our lives, and it was all put out there to share with everybody. And as you mentioned earlier, when the song became a hit, they were on tour for 2+ years. And having to rehash your personal low point in front of a massive audience every night for 2+ years. Whoa. Tony later told The Guardian of the time, we were on tour for Tragic Kingdom for 28 months. We were going through the breakup, and in every interview we were talking about it, so we were opening this wound on an hourly basis. It was so brutal. I don't know how, but we made it through.
Yeah, I always feel bad when people have a hit written about something traumatic in their lives. And I remember having to interview the guy from Train about Drops of Jupiter, specifically about the 20th anniversary of that song, which is about his mother's death. And I got the sense when I was interviewing him that he didn't particularly feel great about having to sit all day and dredge all this up, despite the fact that I don't know who was making him promote the 20th anniversary of the song, because I don't even know if there was a reissue or anything. But yeah, I know. I always feel bad for those people, and I always feel bad being the guy at the other end of the phone or the other end of the microphone or whatever it is, having to ask those questions.
Oh, man. Anyway, so back to No Doubt. You mentioned earlier that the prevailing narrative around this was Tony as villain, which, remember, I don't think that's helped by the video. Don't they do like a lot of shots of him kind of like...
Well, we will touch on this.
Okay.
The video for Don't Speak was basically when everybody in the band were really mad that Gwen was getting all the headlines and getting all the cover shots and everything.
Right.
And they decided to basically address that head on and do this video that was going to be a big cathartic, like they were going to act out their private dramas on the screen and hope that kind of helped. But yeah, we'll get more into that later. But that was
narrator
so that
voice.
was intentional.
It did not.
Yeah, it did not. They haven't made an album in 10 years.
But Gwen, to her credit, went out of the way in various interviews to defend him. She said, everybody's like, God, that guy is a jerk, which is not fair because he didn't have his lyrics to talk about me when I smothered him and he didn't have a life. It must be hard for him to take when people write, how could you leave Gwen? She's so great. But they don't know me. They don't see my faults. They just see me however they want to see me. They think I have abs and I don't. I have fat.
Her self-deprecation seems really authentic, and it makes me love her, but it also makes me really sad. There's a great part in the Spin piece when she says, quote, I want to have a time when I don't need a boyfriend, but it's just natural to want someone. There's nothing better than that. And then after a brief pause, she leans forward and whispers to the journalist, so what did Tony say about me?
Yeah, I mean, what was she, like 25? 20?
Yeah,
23.
younger, I
Yeah.
would say. Yeah. Yeah.
Oy.
And she was still living at home with her dad. There's like I'll touch on this later. Like she was saying like, yeah, I kind of want to move to LA someday if my dad will let me. Like they were very young, both chronologically, but also mentally is not the way I want to phrase that. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
In a very inexperienced, I'd say, outside of musical stuff. But a really underappreciated track on Tragic Kingdom is Sunday Morning, which sort of blends the sarcasm of Just a Girl, which we'll talk about in a minute, with the venom of Happy Now. And clearly it's directed at Tony. Gwen sings, sappy, pathetic little me. That was the girl I used to be. You had me on my knees. I'd trade you places any day. And according to Tony, he wrote the music to the song to serenade Gwen when she was sick in the bathroom. He told Complex, Gwen wasn't feeling well, and I was at my parents' house in Yorba Linda, and I had the guitar. She was sitting in the bathroom, and I was just sitting outside the bathroom singing, kind of serenading her. I was just singing like, somebody's feeling quite ill. And that became Sunday Morning. That's how the song started, but obviously it's not about someone feeling ill now. Gwen wrote the lyrics. I find this slightly ungallant snapshot of the song's genesis as maybe revenge for these pointed lyrics. What do you think? Yeah, my girlfriend had diarrhea and was sitting on the toilet, so I sat outside with a guitar, and then she took that piece of music I wrote to make her feel better and put mean lyrics about me in there.
Yeah. Ugh.
I don't know. But let's go on to happier topics now. Let's have a little friendly chin wag about the best songs called Sunday Morning, because there are many.
Run them down.
Well, it's one of my favorites by Margot Groyan, Sunday Morning from 1968's Take a Picture, I think the album's called.
No idea.
Great, like, obscure late 60s pop singer.
Mm-hmm.
Sunday Morning by the Velvet Underground, of course.
Probably my favorite.
Yeah. Sunday Morning by Madness.
Oh.
I mean, of course, these Madness super fans have a song named, let's share a name with a Madness song. Easy, like a Sunday Morning. We'll count that.
Yeah.
Commodores, that might be my favorite on here. Sunday Morning by Maroon 5. I secretly like that song.
No comment.
Okay. One Sunday Morning by Wilco. We'll count that, even though it's not technically Sunday Morning. And Matthew Sweet of Ming T with Austin Powers and Susanna Hoffs
Right.
and others has Sunday Morning too.
This
Am
is
I
my
forgetting any?
Yeah, you are. This is my gotcha journalism moment. Sunday Morning Coming Down, you rube. The Chris Christopherson song.
You know what? I had that on there, and then I took it off because I thought that its title deviated too far from Sunday Morning.
All right. But
no, you're right.
But
okay.
that doesn't. But then
no,
that doesn't
okay.
give us the opportunity to tell people the story behind Sunday Morning Coming Down of Chris Christopherson being so desperate to get his demos into the hands of Johnny Cash that he commandeered an Army Reserve helicopter, flew it onto Cash's front lawn, and strolled up to the front door to give him the demo tape. Chris Christopherson.
Did Johnny Cash walk out with a gun just because he was like, "What's going on?" I mean, he probably. Had a gun
wouldn't you?
90% of his waking hours. Yeah, we're being invaded by Chris Christopherson. Fair.
Woo. As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages. All right, Spiderwebs.
Yes, Spiderwebs, maybe my favorite song on this album.
Mm-hmm.
It's the song that at least half a dozen people I knew used as their voicemail greeting back in the day because of the, I'm walking in the spiderweb, so leave a message and I'll call you back, refrain at the end. Did you have people who did that?
No.
Oh, okay. And therein lies the difference between our high school experiences. This song is basically Destiny's Child's Bugaboo before cell phones were a thing. It's inspired by a guy who'd gotten wind of Gwen's breakup with Tony and launched an ardent phone campaign to convince her to go out with him. Never good. Gwen talked about this in a video the group made in 2009 about some of their past songs. She said, "I always had a boyfriend, so I never had to deal with guys trying to go out with me. But there was this one guy, and he used to call me in the middle of the night and try to sing me poetry on the phone or play acoustic guitar for 15 minutes at a time. I didn't know how to get off the phone. Giving this guy my number was the biggest regret of my life." So she wrote the song with Tony, who is thrilled to note that it's one of the few songs on the record that isn't about him. And in fact, he and Gwen are the only two people who know who the song's actually about. And they've been very reluctant to share because it's kind of a mean song. She says in the same video, "It's such a mean song," to which Tony adds, "Not as mean as Happy Now," which is about him.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Spiderwebs also cements her ties to another new wave pop group fronted by a platinum bombshell, Blondie. Debbie Harry sang about a stalker on One Way or Another, but it was actually another of their songs that inspired Spiderwebs, at least from a musical standpoint. According to Tony Kanal, he and Gwen tried to do something like Blondie's cover of The Tide is High, where they used different tempos going from the intro to the main part of the song. So that's a musical inspiration from Blondie there. Yeah.
Well, now we arrive at the other standout track on Tragic Kingdom, which is Just a Girl, the song that really, as you mentioned earlier, it's this and Don't Speak. It's when they played on their first TV appearance when they were on Conan. And the song that cracked the kingmakers of LA radio, K-Rock, which again, for the third time this podcast, had told them it would take an act of God to get them on the radio. And the milieu at this time is stuff like Bad Religion, Rage Against the Machine, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden. So what a breath of fresh air to have Gwen Stefani's voice come on over the radio. And K-Rock had actually begun to receive complaints about just how few women they played. And, talk about the diametrically opposed ideal to grunge is Just a Girl. But their parents figure very highly into this song. We'll talk about in a second how her dad inspired it, but her mom took issue with it, specifically the swears. They were driving in California when the song became a hit, and her mom said, "Are you going to say those curse words on stage?" Because she'd invited some of her relatives to the show. But Gwen told her mom that she wasn't planning on swearing, but the frustration grew inside of her, and she drew a line in the sand. She said, "No, I'm not going to change my lyrics. My lyrics are my children." Who said that? Isn't that from Spinal Tap? Whatever. And her mom didn't talk to her for a week. Ouch. Aww. But the song originally came out of her frustration that when she was dating Tony, her dad at one point scolded her for staying out too late. And then she drove home alone, which he thought was, I guess, dangerous in the mean streets of Orange County. And she felt that he was being overprotective because she was, in her words, just a girl. And those, the lyrics, I'm just a girl, all pretty and petite, so don't let me have any rights. Before that tremendous hook, I've had it up to here. Her vocal performance on that song is really great. She does that kind of a pout thing she leans into.
Yeah,
You
really
compared
cool.
it to Leslie Gore's You Don't Own Me or Dionne Warwick's Don't Make Me Over. Gwen later said, I wouldn't trade being female for anything, but guys don't understand what a burden it can be sometimes. And it is kind of a companion piece to Spiderwebs, which is about her literally being harassed by a guy on the phone at all hours of the night. I remember reading, our school had like the Disney magazine, Disney Adventures. And like, I remember reading in that about like Gwen was like the female rocker that it was cool to look up to. And they made such a big deal about her doing push-ups on stage and having great abs, which was, but I mean, the
90s.
Yeah, exactly. But she did break her foot at one point on stage. Yeah. God love her. Writing in Pitchfork a few years back, Jillian Mapes said of Just a Girl, it is not a subtle song, but what it's doing is quietly masterful. The sarcasm subverts the underlying victimhood in a sneering way, but victimhood is also something girls, particularly white or privileged girls, quickly understand as a tool for getting what they want. Still, though, there's always somebody out there who's going to miss the message. And Spin asked her about this in 1996, and she said, I hate it when I'm asked what that song is about. The lyrics are so obvious. If you don't think it's sarcastic, you've got to be like an idiot. Music journalists. But this song actually presages, prefigures, pre-somethings, Spice Girls, girl power.
At least in the States.
Yeah, that's true. Mike.com, Tom Barnes writing over there says, Just a Girl helped amplify the message of the Riot Girl movement who, according to their manifesto, fought for the psychic and cultural lives of girls and women everywhere. And it's kind of that bit of like putting a little sugar into your message to help it get over into the mainstream. Because Bikini Kill, Brat Bill, Heavens to Betsy, L7, that was not exactly radio-friendly sounds. But no doubt, got the message across by being super, super catchy. Made it onto MTV. And that's the thing about ska is it's not threatening. Parents can be like, this is fun. I'll take my kids to that. Just a Girl, of course, got sinks in Clueless, Romy and Michelle's high school reunion, both of which are, now, if not at the time, looked upon as groundbreaking works of feminist cinema.
We should do Clueless soon.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, and, here we are, straight white manning our way through a piece on Gwen Stefani. So we'll go back to Jillian Mapes at Pitchfork. Quote, following the surge of third-wave feminism in the early 90s, the mid-90s became the peak of the angry white female era in rock and pop. It was a time when feminized aggression from Heigl and Riot Girl to Liz Phair and Alanis Morissette was suddenly perceived as being on trend, as if women haven't been furious forever. Stefani, girly tomboy ultra, arguably benefited from this kind of branding, even while she maintained the fun, energetic personality that led Courtney Love to dub her a cheerleader and others to call her the anti-Courtney Love. Who hasn't Courtney Love offended at this point? The rest of her bandmates, every single peer from the era. Yeah. She told, anyway, the quote that this is referencing is Courtney Love told 17, she, quote, wasn't interested in being the cheerleader. I'm not interested in being Gwen Stefani. But, Gwen got her back a few years later with the massive hit in Hollaback Girl, which has the cheerleader chant and the costume in the video. Yeah, and Gwen, she has a sense of self-awareness about this. I mean, she said at the time, maybe I should be more of a tough chick. But I'm not. That's not me. I love makeup. I love getting my hair done. I love pedicures. I'm the furthest thing from a rock chick. She talks about going to Knott's Berry Farm to see the Ice Capades. Yeah.
Again, Sound of Music.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. According to, again, that Chris Heath story in Rolling Stone, she was so nervous about her, about spelling things that she carried a spell check computer in her bag. which
is the least punk thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, but, girls at this time being able to see all versions of themselves represented is very important. Ilana Kaplan writing in The Guardian back in 2015, for misunderstood teenage girls everywhere, Stefani stood out as a central voice for the misfits. She was never quite Alanis or a Spice Girl. She was a tomboy who wasn't afraid to speak up for anyone who is in between. She was the pretty, creative, artsy girl in high school that wasn't afraid to stick up for herself or you. She was a punk in plaid who served as just one of the guys. Stefani was one of the women that you looked up to for her incredible vocals and I don't give a damn sentiment. She didn't care what you thought of her, but she did care about her feelings and making sure you knew what they were. And her fans called themselves Gwenabes. Did they?
Journalists called their fans that. Gwenabes. There's something about that doesn't land. Ironic, though, coming just in advance of Spice Girls with Wannabe.
Yeah.
There you go, yeah. Speaking of Knott's Berry Farm, No Doubt's breakthrough record took its name from Knott's Berry's rival, Disneyland. And it's both an ode to the band's hometown and a nod to how Disneyland subtly creeped its way into the band's writing sessions. The Stefanis were from Anaheim, and as we said earlier, the band house on Beacon Avenue was just down the road from the Magic Kingdom. And guitarist Tom Dumont later said every night we could hear and see the fireworks show from Disneyland. At night you could hear the Yeti from inside the Matterhorn ride growl every 60 seconds, which sounds like hell. And Dumont says that he had a teacher in middle school who used to refer to Disneyland as the Tragic Kingdom, and that helped inspire the title track, which even sampled some theme park announcements, which I'm shocked that Disney were cool with that. There seem to be many rumors and theories about the meaning of the song, including one from Pitchfork claiming that the track is about Walt Disney being evil. Whatever the case, there were apparently no hard feelings with Disney because when Gwen was presented with the key to the city of Anaheim in 2002, the ceremony was held at Disneyland. And this brings us to the cover of the album, another tribute to their hometown. They're from Orange County.
Oranges.
They're in Orange Grove. Get it? Not exactly subtle. The band, minus Gwen, stands in an orange grove while Gwen stands like a 1940s Vargas girl in a retro red dress. Eagle-eyed fans will notice that there's an extra band member in the background. Gwen apparently insisted that Eric Stefani sit in for the cover shoot, and this was despite the fact that he'd not technically been a member of the band for months, maybe even a year or two at this point. But she felt that he played a big enough role on the album with the inclusion of 2 of his songs. Plus, he contributed to Don't Speak and Different People and Sunday Morning and ended on this. So she felt like he deserved to be on the cover, especially if, in addition to the 8+ years he'd spent fronting the band before that. But the decision to include Eric made things a little awkward during the shoot. If you look at the sleeve booklet, Eric is always standing at the back or at the side, and he's usually looking away. I guess he felt weird being back. I guess the other band members felt weird that he was back. She would later say it was very weird. It was horrible. So that's sad. But you know what's even more horrible? The red dress that she wore on the cover got stolen. It was loaned to the Hard Rock Cafe and later displayed at the Fullerton Museum Center in an exhibit called The Orange Groove, Orange County's Rock and Roll History. But then in January of 2005, this dress was stolen, this priceless bit of rock and roll memorabilia taken from under their noses. Can you believe it? Someone finally listened to me and put it in a museum where it belonged. And then this happened. I can't believe it. Jesus Christ. Despite the desperate pleas for its return, the dress, which had been appraised at around $5,000 at the time, has still not been recovered.
Wow. What else did they take?
I don't know. I'm almost guessing just that.
Yeah, like a targeted theft. It is believed the dress was stolen between 2:30 and 3:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. What was happening in that museum during that time? I'm just imagining a security guard like they're like smashing the glass to get through it. Anyway, you know what I just read? It was kind of funny on Spiderwebs. You know the steel drums. You know who plays those?
Oh yeah, no.
Stephen Perkins from Jane's Addiction, who famously plays steel drums on Jane Says. So, if you needed yet another vision of the Caribbean as filtered through a white guy from California, hard to get more illustrative than a bunch of ska dorks from Anaheim with a white guy playing steel drums on track one of their breakthrough record. Little on the nose there, world. So, Tragic Kingdom released on October 10th, 1995. I'm just going to quote you here. Exploded onto the music scene like rays of sun after a cold Seattle rainstorm.
Yes, that was a grunge simile there. You like that? Like Southern California is different than Seattle, okay? Like this was like 9,000 words at this point. Come on. I was tired.
We have said many times, though, that this was shot in the arm following the dour stretch of flannel-clad misanthropes lurching their way through drop-tuned dirges about depression and heroin and, I don't know, lumber.
That's yours.
But it has been credited with helping to break ska in the mainstream, opening a lane for bands like Real Big Fish, Goldfinger, and the Mighty Mighty Bosstones. Some have debated whether the rise of No Doubt is a cause or symptom of the 90s ska boom. There's a tremendous anecdote about this from Tom Dumont. One of his hands was injured when someone asked him for an autograph, and he said, quote, "When they realized I wasn't in 311, they grabbed the pen back and cut my hand." I can't imagine loving anything enough to attack a musician's hand, much less 311. Anyway, Tragic Kingdom sold 16 million copies, reached number one on the Billboard 200 over a year after it was released, so something of a slow burn. Again, Tom Dumont, for years when they were just struggling, he claimed that he would only get a tattoo if they ever sold millions of records, and then subsequently chickened out. Weirdly enough, only one of the singles, Just a Girl, cracked the Hot 100, but the rest were not released as proper singles, so it's kind of a technicality there.
I don't know if it's just a ploy to get people to buy the rest of the album, but that was the only song that was released as a single, Just a Girl.
That's so wild to me. Grammy nominations for Best Rock Album, Best New Artist, Song of the Year, Best Pop Performance. Lost all of them. They did, however, get Best Group Video for Don't Speak at the VMAs. Their tour, we talked about that tour. Ooh, sometimes on that incredible tour, they opened for Bush. Wow. I wonder if Gwen regrets that, getting to know Gavin Rossdale better. Didn't he cheat? He cheated on her like 17,000 times, right?
That I don't know. I mean, you think either of us would know that from our People Page 6 background, but I actually...
Yeah, it was his, he cheated on her with a nanny.
Oh.
Hey. That's, what a loser. British rock magazine Kerrang! Was one of the dissenting notes during this world-conquering... I just read ahead. During this world-conquering era, writing in a tremendous pan... Mere words cannot describe how abysmally gutless and sugar-smothered it is. Much like an anteater with a punctured snout, No Doubt suck badly.
One of the best pans I've ever read.
Incredible. Tony Kanal wanted to make it into a band t-shirt.
Should have. Would have sold
good.
Very well.
That's Primus's thing. All their shirts say Primus sucks. Accurate. This is cute. After Tragic Kingdom was a smash, Gwen still lobbied that Eric come back and be involved in their follow-up, which took 5 years to make. Return to Saturn came out in 2000. Mm-hmm. She was saying Eric is No Doubt. And again, to illustrate the point in the Rolling Stone profile, she pointed to some steamed vegetables on a dinner tray saying, "These are really good, but if I can put a little butter and salt and pepper on that, it would be great." And that's what Eric is. Sure. He has a co-write on one track on Return to Saturn, but other than that, doesn't that seem to have been involved. Although Jerry Harrison of the Talking Heads was producing the track New. Jerry Harrison, probably the fourth most famous member of Talking Heads. Jerry Harrison, folks.
Friend of the pod, Jerry Harrison.
All right, Jordan, bring us home. Tell us about the music videos from Tragic Kingdom.
Yes, we can't end this episode without touching on the iconic music videos. As we mentioned, the video for Just a Girl opens in the house that the band shared down the street from Disneyland. Before moving on to the split bathroom scenes, the boys are in dingy CBGBs-like squalor, and Gwen is in a palatial ladies' room. Just a Girl. Get it?
Mm-hmm.
I guess it doesn't really get there. She purchased the red, white, and blue tennis top that she wears at a thrift shop just before filming, and she added the fake diamonds to it herself, which kind of signals her future interest in fashion designs. But anyway, in the background of the Just a Girl video, you'll notice a very pregnant woman. That is Gwen's younger sister, Jill. But there's a little bit of drama, I guess mild on the no doubt scale of drama that stemmed from the Just a Girl shoot. Drummer Adrian Young, he who undresses all the time, apparently, saw an extra on the set who sculpted his hair into devil horns. Very 90s. Adrian liked this look and adopted it for himself. Then he got an irate letter from this horned extra who accused him of being a fraud. I guess you don't, if a guy voluntarily walks around with devil horns, you probably don't want to piss this guy off.
God, the 90s were weird.
Yeah, and you really don't want him to have your contact information. So yeah, this is from the Chris Heath Rolling Stone cover story. He said that this letter said, "You claim to be part of the dark side when you're just a big fake. You're just a big rock star. If you have any integrity left, you would write me back."
Counterpoint, did he? Did he claim to be part of the dark side?
Oh, I mean, this guy is giving me Unabomber vibes.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, so yeah, Adrian ended up shaving the devil horns off because he didn't want to deal with this guy anymore. He was accusing him of stealing his look.
Don't speak. Moving on to Don't Speak.
Yes, Don't Speak. The drama there was a little more overt. As the band took off, the other guys in the group who weren't Gwen Stefani had to contend with the fact that they had a ridiculously good-looking, energetic, charismatic frontwoman who, it must be noted, wrote much of her own lyrics, so she was gonna get the lion's share of the attention. I mean, you see it on the cover of the album. It's the Almost Famous thing. Look, I'm just one of the out-of-focus guys in the back. So I don't really know what they're expecting, but it got awkward. There would be magazine photo shoots with the whole band, and then the editor would crop the rest of the group out. Journalists would talk to the whole band and then just print what Gwen says. There was a famous incident with Spin where the band was supposed to be on the cover for their November 1996 issue, but ultimately they just went with Gwen under the headline, "Riot Girly, no doubt just want to have fun," which we touched on earlier. And there was an incident in London where Gwen lost her voice and management were grumbling about how no one was going to be happy if Gwen didn't show up to do press. And guitarist Tom Dumont screams, "Has it got to the point where we mean nothing? Yes or no? If Gwen doesn't speak, do we mean nothing?" And when he calmed down, he elaborated to the journalist, "I understand it intellectually, but I just feel like I'm second class compared to her. I feel I'm just a lesser person. I don't look as good. I'm not as bitchin' as she is in everyone else's eyes. The reason I wanted to be a rock star when I was a kid, I thought that it would be a way for people to like me. And now that I got here, I'm not getting that payoff that I was always expecting." Oh, it's very honest.
Yeah, well,
Tony Canal.
he was right.
Well, yeah. And Tony Canal, who probably has even more complicated feelings given his past relationship with Gwen, had more to say about her getting the star treatment. He said, "We want people to know that we're a band. For many years, we talked about what would happen if we ever got offered this sort of stuff. We're going to stick together. We're not going to do it. We're going to say it's the whole band or nothing." But when you're actually put in that situation and you see that your friend has the opportunity, maybe the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be on the cover of a magazine, why would you hold someone back from that? So it was rough for them, but rather than let the spite and bile fester, they took the brave approach of confronting all this drama head on in their video for Don't Speak. And they kind of acted out the whole photographer singles out Gwen psychodrama as the plot line for this video by Sophie Mueller. And though the song was ostensibly about Gwen's split with Tony, the video was kind of about Gwen's split with the band. And the boys all give Gwen dirty looks, as you noted earlier, and they seem to be kind of upset throughout the whole video. And Tony commented, "We didn't want it to be about a normal breakup, so we thought, what would be the saddest thing that could happen? The band splitting up." So that's what the video's about. And ironically, the night before the video shoot, two members, Tom and Gwen, came close to walking out of the group. The band claims that they were trying to get Gwen to take some time off after her voice kept giving out, but she responded with an angry variation of, "I'm going to do whatever I want, and if you don't like it, quit." She claims that she was tired of everyone constantly talking about how it was always her face on the cover of magazines and just didn't want to deal with it anymore and kind of issued an ultimatum that, this was how it was going to be. Yeah, I'm not even going to speculate on that. Anyway, but whatever the case of the Don't Speak video recording Eve fight, they hashed it all out, and the video proved to be a catharsis that allowed them to make another album, 2000's adult new wavy Return of Saturn. And let's not forget 2001's Rock Steady the following year, which is honed by the Neptunes, Sly and Robbie, William Orbit, Prince, and Rick Ocasek.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's a hell of a lineup. And only 1 year after the previous album. Damn. And then came Gwen's duets with Moby and Eve. I love that Moby song.
That Moby song whips.
Yeah, that is a great song. The Harajuku Street Style, which you mentioned at the top of the episode. The solo albums, but this is all another story. No Doubt have released only one album in the last 20 years. 2012's decidedly lackluster Push and Shove. And they've been on an indefinite hiatus since a brief run of festival shows in 2015. And since then, the non-Gwen members of No Doubt have teamed with AFI lead singer Davey Havok to form the new wave supergroup, their words, Dream Car.
Got him.
Then there seems to be a bit of sadness there with the rest of the No Doubt crew who aren't Gwen. In 2020, guitarist Tom Dumont, that quote machine of a man, shared a photo to Instagram in honor of the album Tragic Kingdom's 25th anniversary. And the caption read in part, "I can't believe it's been 25 years. In some ways, it feels like yesterday. In some ways, it feels like a distant dream. Sometimes great things fall apart, which is a shame. Yet here we are 25 years later. It is what it is, and I keep trying to make peace with that. I'm especially grateful to all those who helped us along the way, and most of all to those of you who enjoyed Tragic Kingdom and came out for the shows over the years. I'd love to do one more No Doubt tour, but it feels like that ain't gonna happen. It's bittersweet. In any case, what great memories. Thanks all." Oh,
That's a bummer.
I know.
Especially with, whatever, man. Just her becoming a reality TV star and dating sentient slab of ham.
We are in a post-music society. We do music just to get the better brand endorsements and reality TV gigs.
Oy.
Katy Perry,
Yeah.
Rihanna.
Oh, that's so grim.
Anyway.
I never thought I'd end this feeling sorry for No Doubt guitarist Tom Dumont.
See, I told you there would be an arc
An
here.
arc, yeah, there it is.
Both Gwen and Tony have talked about the heartbreak in Tragic Kingdom, which is simultaneously what made it resonate with so many, but also makes it hard for them to revisit. Gwen later said, quote, "The whole purpose for the Tragic Kingdom is the breakup, the heartbreak. There's a lot of feelings. When you say the words Tragic Kingdom, my heart still kind of is broken. Because those songs were about a really sad time for me. However, I would like to try to end this on a slightly more upbeat note. There's a song included on Gwen's 2004 solo album, Love Angel Music Baby, and it's one that, to me, closes the book on this whole Tragic Kingdom chapter. I'm referring to, of course, the song Cool, which was written as an affectionate tribute to Tony and the friendship they maintained, or at least they maintained as of 2004. The words include, "We used to think it was impossible. Now you call me by my new last name. Remember Harbor Boulevard, the dreaming days where the mess was made. Look how all the kids have grown. We've changed, but we're still the same. After all that we've been through, I know we're cool. May we all be so cool with our exes."
Well, folks, we're off into our own Tragic Kingdom, and I have not come around on ska. But I have perhaps come around on the saga of No Doubt, at least as a hero's journey.
Told you it'd be an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself marry Blake Shelton.
There it is.
There it is. Thanks for listening. This has been Too Much Information. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. We'll catch you next time.
Hey.
Too Much Information was a production of iHeartRadio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The supervising producer is Mike Johns.
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl.
With original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more podcasts on iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.